Welcome to the second day of this UNESCO-Chairs International Conference. I hope you all slept well, ready for another day of very fruitful and interesting discussions. To start with, we will have Professor Benno Werlen, who will give us an introduction to the thematic concept of today's event. Please.
Yeah, good morning also from my side. I hope you slept well. We had nearly the first tropical night climatically in Jena yesterday or last night. After the tropical night with Franz Liszt in the planetarium, we could see that in the meantime we don't have to travel far to have tropical conditions with all the implications we will probably face. I was just telling you a little bit about this place here. It was constructed 1787, in the time when the University of Jena, according to the German newspaper Die Zeit, was the intellectual metropolis of the world for a blink of an eye, for 20 or 30 years, around the turn of the century. The Rose Halls, where we are, served as a meeting place for Goethe and Humboldt in 1794, when they talked lengths about anatomy and the description of nature. That was the big topic at the time. Later, Clara Wieck, respectively Clara Schumann, again Franz Liszt, Camille de Saint-Saëns, and many others were giving well accepted and acclaimed concerts in this place. This was the concert place of the city at the time. So we are in a cultural monument, if you want, with also a quite important intellectual significance for the topic of today. Today we are working on the Jena principles that I see as, if you want, the guideline for the working group discussion this afternoon. So there are 7 of them, and it takes me about 5 minutes to go through them very quickly. The first one is a very simple one, but very often a forgotten one. We heard yesterday that Haeckel and Karlowitz were both here, and after Karlowitz conceptualizing of the economy, Haeckel invented modern ecology, and sustainability took then a turn towards ecology. So it's mainly about society or culture and the natural environment. But there is a big problem involved, especially for our topic. If you say that there is a big difference between culture and the surrounding environment, then the problematic inclusion of that is that we are not part of nature, but we are. Our body is part of nature. And our body, all what we do with our body is embedded in cultural traditions, in cultural mindsets, in cultural schemes of interpretation. So that's why we are part of it, and it's not a question of opposition. If we take it as a question of opposition, then the geosciences have the dominant place in the whole discussion. As important all this is, that's not my point, but it's excluding the cultural and the social dimension of nature. And that's complicated and I think not convincing. The second one is, if you accept that starting point, then it becomes obvious that the way we are transforming nature is strictly related to what we do in our everyday activities. And as this is culturally embedded, spatially located, and historically contextualized. This is the starting point. If we take just institutional regulations and ordering of societies to tackle a problem, then it's a top-down and it's a kind of pressure, and it's not embedded in the cultural connections. So especially the voice of arts then becomes an important, if you take the starting point of the cultural. And I see the art as the perfect place where new ways of connecting with the world can be developed. An imagination how the world could be differently, less destructive, let's put it that way. This idea leads directly to the third point, that the top-down logic is embedded in the institutional order of societies. And the implication of that is that if you have a top-down, then the idea is leading that what has been internationally agreed to do, like the SDGs, has to be applied everywhere in the world in more or less the same way. So it's one-size-fits-all logic. But if you bought a shirt and you took the one size form, you probably also experienced that one size fits rarely all. So we need to develop concepts and conceptualizations that are starting from the bottom up to take the cultural dimension serious and also the role of arts adequate. As a direct consequence of this, the fourth principle is that cultural and regional diversity shall be the starting point of every sustainability strategy. Everything people do is locally emplaced, historically situated, and culturally embedded. So if that is the point, if you want to tell people something that's acceptable for them without too much pressure, then it has exactly to respect these 3 points: cultural embeddedness, historical situated, and locally emplaced. So successful sustainability strategies need to embrace cultural and regional differences instead of ignoring the richness of our world and homogenizing humanity with top-down strategies. The fifth principle is about the role of arts and the humanistic and social research. As I have said before, arts opens new horizons. They can design the ways we could live in advance as a proposition. And then people can think about it, try about it, what it means for themselves, and hopefully then maybe all accepting the interesting one. Likewise, the social science and the humanities help to understand us social and cultural dimensions of the current transformation and get us away from first-aid solutionism. As important this solutionism is for the current situation, on the long term, it's jumping not far enough. We are just dealing with the problem we are creating, and we are not trying to avoid the problems. So in a neoliberal way, we can say it doesn't matter. Problems create new markets, and markets will solve the problem. But the question is, for what price? The sixth principle highlights that the true bottom-up strategy involves a change of our ways of producing and applying knowledge. So that's the question for learning and education, what Carlos, Hela, and others were explaining yesterday in their presentations. Many sustainability policies try to reach and tell others how to do things properly without knowing their cultural context, without respecting their expertise. So if we really want to have an acceleration of the change, we need to mobilize the capacities of everyday people in their everyday situations with their experiences. They also have their knowledge, they also have their competences, otherwise they wouldn't live. And if you take about regional traditions and regional cultural settings, people are surviving for thousands of years in certain places, so they can't be totally wrong. So we can also learn from them how to deal in certain situations with certain problems. So the basis for this is mutual learning from each another. And finally, the seventh principle, it calls for consequently for civic engagement. Bottom-up policies enable to use the forces and creativity of concerned citizens. Concerned citizens, since the one day are realizing that the things are going is maybe not the best way we can achieve, that we have to change something. And they have their expertise in their fields, and I think we can learn also people from academic institutions can learn from them a lot, because the academic training is not linked to the situated experiences. That's shortly the 7 principles. Maybe we can print them out during the lunch break so that all the working groups will have them in a written form at disposition. That's all what I have to say at this moment. But
Thank you, Benno, for this inspiring framework.